So I used to love to make people laugh. And at the dinner table, so I had three siblings. So there were six of us at the dinner table. The only way I could get attention, and the only way I could be seen as the middle child was to make everybody laugh. And it came naturally to me. I've always been able to make people laugh. I don't know how it happens. Every time I go on stage, I'm nervous it's not going to happen this time. But it always does. But I started by making my family laugh, primarily my brother Tom. And so then it just became something that was a lot of fun for me, and they seemed to enjoy it. And it even got to the point, Jeff, where I would wait. I would be very strategic about when I would say something. I wanted to wait till he had either a mouthful of food or he just took a drink of milk. And then my goal was to see if I could make him laugh and have the milk come out his nose. And that's when you
Yeah,
knew
there you go.
that's when you knew that was like a standing ovation.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Frank Keck. Frank is a motivational speaker and the author of the books Unleashing Freakness and Embrace Your Freakness. Before becoming a full-time speaker, he spent 7 years as a leadership development trainer and facilitator for Dale Carnegie. He has a bachelor's degree in radio and television communications from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Frank.
Frank, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thanks, Jeff. It's good to. This is a nice, comfortable couch you've got here.
Exactly. You know, I actually have done a couple recordings on my office, which has a couch, but honestly, it's a pain in the ass to move all my equipment and the ring light and all that. So I just do it from the desk. And you're standing up. I'm envious because I've thought about I should stand up during. It's more energy that way. So here I am.
Well, when we were first trying to get all the electronics going this morning, I was laying down on the couch and the computer wouldn't sign in, so I had to go to Plan B.
It said, "Yeah, I got a message. Frank's having issues," and I'm like, "Yeah, don't I know it?"
Nice that your computer acknowledged it.
It's AI. It went right to your mind.
Yep.
And pulled it right out.
Yep.
No, I'm very excited to talk to you. Jen Toro introduced us about 3 years ago, and we instantly bonded when we met. So that was it's all good. So yeah, just excited to talk to you. We're going to talk about freakness, embracing it and unleashing it, and having fun at work. But just tell the audience a little bit where you grew up and what was fun for you growing up, what you love doing.
So Jeff asked me a question before we hit record, which was, what was the weather on the day you were born? It was 96. It was the hottest day of the year, and the hospital I was born in had no air conditioning. So every year on my birthday, my mom would tell me that same story. So I was born in Urbana, Illinois. My grandfather had started a hospital there right after World War II. And so all of my siblings and my parents were all born in that same hospital. And then I kind of ventured off. That was in Urbana, Illinois, which is in central Illinois. It's where the University of Illinois is. And then I went down to Southern Illinois and got a degree in broadcasting and spent 4 years learning how to talk like this. And so I can talk like a broadcaster, but I didn't go into that field. Just tried a lot of different things. And then in my mid 30s, I went to work for Dale Carnegie and taught people how to win friends and influence people for about 7 years. And that was really where I got the foundation and became comfortable speaking in public and learned all about training and human beings and human development and a lot of those things. So just a fantastic foundation of understanding other people, understanding yourself, what makes people tick. And then I went to work for myself as a professional speaker in 2001, quit a very cushy job as a mortgage banker that I had no business doing. I remember the day I turned in my resignation there, my boss said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go be a motivational speaker." He said, "How do you do that?" I said, "I have no idea, but I'm going to figure it out." And so that was 24 years ago, and still doing it, still making some money here and there, and changing some lives. But it really took me a while to figure out what's my thing, what's my hook, and
Right.
so that's what we can talk more about today. But I'm passionate
Yeah.
about helping people be seen and see other people, because what I've learned through the years, Jeff, is when people get seen, that's when the magic starts. That's when they really come alive. And so I think everybody wants to be seen. They want to be acknowledged. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to, is helping people to be seen and helping people to be able to see others.
Frank, the podcast is called The Corporate Couch, so I want to hear a little bit more about your origin story and knowing you and your sense of humor. I just, when you tell your birth story, I can see you in your early dating days when a woman would ask you, "What's your sign? What sign were you born under?" You would say maternity ward. So there you go.
That's right.
But anyhow, I'll take bad jokes for 500. Anyhow, but what was fun for you growing up? What did you love doing, and then why broadcasting, radio, and TV communications major? Let's talk a little bit about those things.
So I used to love to make people laugh, and at the dinner table. So I had three siblings, so there were six of us at the dinner table. The only way I could get attention, and the only way I could be seen as the middle child, was to make everybody laugh, and it came naturally to me. I've always been able to make people laugh. I don't know how it happens. Every time I go on stage, I'm nervous it's not going to happen this time, but it always does. But I started by making my family laugh, primarily my brother Tom. And so then it just became something that was a lot of fun for me, and they seemed to enjoy it. And it even got to the point, Jeff, where I would wait. I would be very strategic about when I would say something. I wanted to wait till he had either a mouthful of food or he just took a drink of milk. And then my goal was to see if I could make him laugh and have the milk come out his nose. And that's when you knew
there you go.
That's when you knew that was like a standing ovation at the dinner table.
Hashtag metrics.
That's right.
Success metrics.
That's right. But it was just, being able to get people to laugh. And, what I've since learned is that's the highest point that human beings connect, is through laughter. And so it's just turned out to be a wonderful tool in life. And but I enjoyed that. And then I remember going through high school, I did stand-up comedy for the forensics team and did really well there. Went to the state finals, which irritated my teacher because I just riffed. I never practiced. And
Wow.
I would just do it off the cuff. I think they call that improv now. And
Right.
so it just came naturally. My dad asked me when I was graduating high school, he said, "What do you want to do for a living? What do you want to study in college?" And I said, "I want to be a stand-up comic." And he said, "You can't be a stand-up comic. You need a degree in business." And I said, "Well, why can't I be a stand-up comic?" And he said, "Because you're not funny." So I have a degree in radio and TV because that was as close as I could come to doing stand-up, but
Right.
still please my dad. And never went into radio and TV, but I think that background gave me kind of the encouragement to end up where I am today.
Yeah, a lot of comedians, and I know it's I would say most people would think I'm somewhat funny, but I love, like you, making people laugh growing up. But for me, it was almost like a protection thing emotionally for me because my mom died a day before my 5th birthday, and my
Wow.
dad had early onset Alzheimer's when I was 10 years old. So I think it just, I like making people laugh, and maybe it was the people pleaser in me, but but yours was just like, hey, I need attention because I'm the middle guy in the family. So, but there was no kind of other, we're not going to get into it because it's the corporate couch, but there was no kind of an event that happened that you kind of it impacted you in a way that you wanted to kind of express yourself through humor.
It's still a way to express myself, but I did do some amateur stand up, and I got to meet some professionals. I met Tim Allen and a couple other
Oh, wow.
George Wallace. Those are the two that I remember the most. But a lot of those guys that go and do that professionally, and gals now, they're very dark people. And so,
well, Robin Williams, the
list of
John Candy,
the list of
John
comedians that have ended their own lives is long, and it's a dark environment. And so as I did that a little bit, I thought, oh man, I don't want to hang out with these people. I want to go hang out with people who are actually going to enjoy life. And so that was part of why I didn't pursue that anymore either. But it's kind of cool. Like you and I both get to use comedy. We get to use humor now in our careers, and it's really can be a powerful tool because it really helps people to come together and to bond. So it's
100%
turned out being really cool.
Yeah. And just one more question on the stand-up. Any stand-up comedians you enjoy watching and listening to today?
I think my favorite one right now is Brad Williams. And Brad Williams he calls himself a midget. So I don't know what the official terminology is. If it's short person, he calls himself a lot of different things, pint size. And but he
vertically challenged.
Yeah, he makes fun of himself, which I guess, it's okay to make fun of yourself. I think he's got a pretty healthy self-esteem about it, but he's just so funny. He's not really dirty, but he just tells stories about being like, he told this one story about he went on a date with a gal, and they went back to her house for a nightcap, and she had a dog, and so she put the dog gate up. So he couldn't get out of the kitchen because he couldn't climb over the dog gate. So
wow.
I think it's just when you just comedians who talk about life and you can relate to it about, what, that is funny. I can picture that. I've never had to climb over the dog gate and couldn't, but it just sounded funny the way he put it together.
Yeah. I always like to ask people, because I think it's still even today, when you graduate college, getting that first job is it's so bad. It's such a bad experience unless, you walk into something. But talk about your first job out of college and how'd you get it?
Mine was arranged, and it was a horrible experience. So it hit I can check all your boxes here. So my family owned furniture stores in central Illinois, and my dad was a big Rotarian, and he had a friend of his who was a Rotarian in Decatur, Illinois, which is the soybean capital of the world. It's the stinkiest place on earth, or one of them. And so I got out of school, and my dad said, you don't need to look for a job. I got a job for you, and you start in 2 weeks. And I said, great. What am I going to be doing? He said, you're going to work at the FM radio station in Decatur as a salesperson. And so I said, well, terrific. He said, my friend runs the station, and his son wants to work in the furniture store, so we're swapping. So his son's going to come work for me. You're going to go work for him. Everything's great. So I show up the first day, and I said, well, do I have a desk? And he said, nope, salespeople don't need desks. And I said, okay. And so they hand me this book, the sales manager did, and he said, okay, here's your guide of what to say and all that kind of stuff and what to sell. And he said, here's a map of central Illinois. And he pointed to Arthur, Illinois. He said, that's your territory. And so I said, oh, well, Arthur, Illinois, isn't that where all the Amish people live? And he said, yes, good luck. So my first job selling radio was in a town with no radios. And so that kind of tells you about the setup for that. That job lasted about 3 months before my dad fired the other guy's son. And so then I got fired the next day. Right. So I had nothing to show for it, but it was an interesting start to my career, and I can look back on it and laugh now.
Yeah, I've interviewed. I have 100 and almost 90 episodes, and I think you're the first guest that was fired at their first job. So there you go. So talk about, like, I know you spent 7 years at Dale Carnegie training and being a facilitator, but you did it pretty young. I mean, based on my math, you were about 27-ish when you started at Dale Carnegie, which I think is amazing. But talk
Yep.
about how you landed there, because that was kind of the heyday of Dale Carnegie, give or take.
I went and took the Dale Carnegie course in 1986 in Macon, Georgia, and really enjoyed it. And I was invited to come back as a graduate assistant. And then when I moved from Macon to Atlanta, I wanted to meet people. So I went back as a graduate assistant. Well, then I moved to Nashville and wanted to meet people there. So I went back again as a graduate assistant. And the instructor that I was assisting said, you know, you really are good at this. Have you ever thought about becoming a Dale Carnegie instructor? And I said, well, no, I haven't. I'm just doing this to continue to work on myself and meet people. And he said, well, I'm going to have you talk to the boss. And so I went and talked to the boss, and he said, you know, it's a 2-year program, and you continue to do what you're doing, and we'll just continue to help you grow and learn how to teach the course. And then you go through a certification process, and then you can get paid to teach the class. And that sounded great. You know, here's somebody taking a chance on this young kid. So then when I went to take the test after 2 years, they said, well, it's $1,500 to take the test. And back then, $1,500 was,
Yeah,
that was like a month's income. And I said, well,
yeah.
I don't have
It'd be like $5,000 today, give or take.
yeah, it'd be like 10 grand, I think, probably.
Yeah.
But I said, well, I don't have that much cash. And so Steve Overton, who was the boss man, said, well, if you come work for me as a salesperson, I'll pay for it. And I said, done. So I quit my job and went and worked for Dale Carnegie. Did pretty good. I became an award-winning salesperson, and so that was pretty good. Became an instructor, and then Steve retired, and so I took over his job running the Nashville office. And typically, a Dale Carnegie instructor teaches one class a year, something like that. And I worked there for 7 years and taught 50 classes. So I was
Wow.
doing it. I would sell during the day, then I would teach a couple nights a week, and they had several different classes, and but it really was. I mean, I loved doing it, and I grew from it every time. But that's where I learned how to facilitate and speak. But I
Yeah.
also learned, hey, I have a natural gift to be funny, and if you can get people to laugh, they relax. And that's a huge thing in dealing with fear. You know, human brain can only have one emotion at a time. So if you have fear running your life right this second, and I can get you to laugh, the fear dissipates, at least for the moment. So it was just a
Yeah.
really cool experience. And then I just did that ran that office and worked for them for 7 years. And then I moved on to do my own speaking thing.
I guess you were doing mortgages at some company, and then you could say, I'm going to go out on my own. Sounds like you come from a family of entrepreneurs. Your grandfather started a hospital system. Your
Yep.
dad had furniture stores. So talk about that transition. What was your biggest fear, going into something on your own, as well as, oh shit, I didn't know this was going to happen when I run my own business.
Well, I wanted to run my own Carnegie, but they wouldn't help me to do that. And so I left there and went and did the mortgage thing because I had a friend doing that. And he said, oh, this is really easy and you make a lot of money and you don't have to work very hard, most of which was not true. But it was an interesting experience. And then, so I did that for a couple of years, but I really had the itch to do the speaking thing. And so I joined the National Speakers Association, and I would just go to the chapter meetings, even though I wasn't doing any speaking, and met a couple of the people there. And one of them was always coming back and talking about the trips, his speaking trips. And I said, how are you getting booked? Because I thought, I'll just do the mortgage thing and then I'll speak on the side. And he said, oh, well, I work with this organization out of Kansas City, National Seminars Group. And they do all the selling, they do all the marketing, they book you. All you do is get on the plane, show up, teach the class. They pay all your expenses and all that stuff. And I thought, man, that's a great deal. So I had them introduce me to National Seminars Group, which is here in Kansas City. And so I flew myself from Nashville, where I was living, to Kansas City interviewed. They offered me they said, we think you'd be really good. We'd like to start contracting with you. And flew back to Nashville, quit my job. And a week later, April 1st, 2001, started working full time for National Seminars, not really knowing what I was getting into. And so the whole entrepreneurial thing, I'd love to say, well, I had this crafted plan and I wanted to work for myself. And it was just, I didn't like working in the job I was in. I wanted to be a speaker. I didn't really think it through. I just thought this will be fun and I'll figure it out. And that's just kind of how
Yeah.
I've lived life is things happen, you figure it out. Right. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about that in terms of you go there. Did they give you the topic you're supposed to talk about, or did you develop your own topic that you were going to, get paid to speak on in various parts of the country?
So they had about 400 speakers that they would contract with, and they had probably 200 different topics. And so they would say, okay, well, which of these topics do you think that you have expertise in? And I said, well, I worked for Dale Carnegie, so I can do a lot of the soft skill things. And so they would have the marketing department create the workbook. And then they also had the certified, I don't know what her certification was in, but she was the one that actually put together the workbooks. And so you'd have the marketing department say, hey, we're going to create a class on this. She'd then put together the workbook, and then they would give you the workbook and you would go out and facilitate it. But you had to bring it to life. And I learned that pretty quick. Like, people aren't going to get their value just from a workbook. Your job as the speaker is to bring it to life and to help people relate to it and to help people understand it. And so I contracted with them for 10 years. And it was really great, Jeff, because I averaged about 135 dates on the road a year. So I would be speaking 135 days a year, all of which I was developing content as we would go. So I'd have the workbook and then I'd add my own things in the margins and my own exercises. And so for 10 years, I got paid to learn and to grow and to practice. And just, it was such a blessing for me that I got paid to learn and develop and grow and all this wonderful stuff. And at the same time, I was helping people. And so by the time I left, I was doing about 125 of their programs. And, because they'd have like 10 different communication programs and, 30 leadership programs. And so I could do any of those, became one of their most requested speakers. And I think, what I learned is if you can be funny, you're memorable. If you're not
Right.
memorable, people aren't going to have you back. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind Embrace Your Freakness is, what can you do to stand out and be memorable? And it all goes back to the being seen, right? If you can be seen and people see you as your true self and you stand out, people can remember that.
Right. What was it like giving your first presentation, your kind of your first speaking engagement? I mean, I think I've never done stand up. I've actually had a kind of a goal to maybe do an open mic night, but I know it would be terrifying and all that. But obviously you had a lot of speaking, because of Dale Carnegie and all that. But was there any surprises during that or that first engagement?
No, it was for National Seminars. Took me to, they would send you out with somebody else. So you would kind of partner along with somebody else for your first couple of times. And so I remember it was this guy I partnered with. We went to New Orleans. First time I'd ever been to New Orleans. First time I'd really ever rented a car on my own. And because I was still pretty young. And so I got to see him do this 2-day workshop. So I saw him do 2 of them. And then I thought, well, I got this. I saw what he did that worked. I saw what he did that didn't work. I had all this stuff that I learned at Dale Carnegie, and I thought, I can do this. I mean, I never thought I can't do it. And I've never had for the 7 years I was in Dale Carnegie, I was given all kinds of situations with people, people crying, people not wanting to talk, people being full of fear, not wanting to get on stage and say anything. And I never had a time where I couldn't handle it. And it was just one of those things. I just found what I was good at. I was very good at comforting people and getting them to, take the deep breath and say, okay, hey, let's move forward. And so so by the time I got to the national seminar stuff, it was like, well, I know I can do this. right?
Yeah.
And then you just go in your first time. And again, I think it's not brilliance. It's maybe just you're not very smart, and so you don't really think about being scared. It was just
Right.
kind of well, this will be fun. I'll get to make people laugh, and I get people are going to all pay attention to me, and I get paid. That's a pretty good
Right.
deal. So
Yeah.
just a lot of really positive things, and then they just continued to grow, and I would focus more on the topics that I wanted to do. And then they said, hey, do you want to develop some topics? And so I developed some topics of my own, wrote my first book. And just, there's so much, I love learning, and there's just so much fun in developing your own content.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
I love learning, and there's just so much fun in developing your own content. And I will go with you if you want to do stand-up, because I think that would be a hoot.
What, to heckle me? You would go up the...
Yeah.
Just a quick aside. When I was in college, I saw Jerry Seinfeld at it was either the Rising Star in New York City or Caroline's. I can't remember, but it was like a month before he was on Carson, the Tonight Show, for the first time. So, and he did heckle our table with a bunch of college buddies. So it was pretty funny. So you're 20 plus years of doing public speaking and motivating people and helping them improve. Any crazy stories, like, something happened,
So yeah, there's a lot of things that happened through the years, but I was up in Detroit. So I was speaking, it was at the Embassy Suites. I don't remember what suburb, but it wasn't downtown. And I was doing a day-long class. And so we go in the classrooms on the first floor, and everybody comes in, they sign in, I'll get a workbook, they all sit down, we start at 9:00. And so I'm going, it's maybe 30 minutes into it, right? And I'm up front talking, and there's the projector behind me and the screen and all that stuff. And I'm just going, bopping along, and all of a sudden this woman raises her hand, and I said, yeah, do you have a question? She said, no, there's a fire. And I said, a fire? What are you talking about? She said, behind you, your screen's on fire. And I turned around, and the whole screen was on fire.
Oh my God.
And I said, okay, everybody, we're going to take a short break. So people ran out of the back. And so I ran to the front desk, and I said, our room's on fire. Do you think that you could put it out? And so they came in with a fire extinguisher, and so anyway, they moved us to another room. And after our 30-minute break, we went back to work. I mean, there were a lot of them, but there was another one that happened in Baltimore, Maryland, and we got put in this really dumpy old hotel. So we start, and we're going for a couple of hours, and I hear this lady scream, and I looked up and I said, "What is it?" She had felt something in her hair, and so she went to touch it, and it was a cockroach crawling through her hair because there were cockroaches in the hotel.
Oh God. Oh man.
So, but it's stuff like that you're like, okay, well now what do I do? Like there's no manual to tell you how to handle stuff like that. And you just have to handle it. And but that's part of the challenge. That's part of what makes it fun. You don't know what's going to happen, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah. I know you co-founded Culture Labs, and I love, part of, I think one of my professional gifts is helping companies build great cultures. But talk about that experience and why'd you start it, and why'd you end it, I guess?
So it all started in 2009. I wrote a book called Embrace Your Freakness. And that is based on, I met Patch Adams. I didn't know it was Patch Adams, but I met him at the Reagan National Airport. He sat down next to me. We started having a conversation. And as we were exchanging names, he said, my name's Henry, but you can call me Patch. That's what my friends call me. And I said, oh, like Patch Adams, the guy in the movie. And he said, well, actually, I am the guy in the movie. And I said, well, that's funny because you don't look anything at all like Robin Williams. And so instantly we were friends. But that became a keynote that then became a book. And the book then became a course. And so we started doing the Embrace Your Freakness experience. And it was to help you figure out, what are you supposed to do with your life? Like, what is it inside of you that makes you unique and remarkable? That's what your freakness is what makes you unique and remarkable. So I had some people go through that. I had some clients down at Texas A&M that said, hey, can you bring that class down here? We'd like to run our team through it. So then we started doing that a couple of times with a couple of teams. We had some people here in Kansas City who went through it and a couple other places. But as I would have these people go through it, they would say, this was so helpful for me personally. Could you come to our company and let my whole team or my whole company go through it? And so I said, sure. And so we started running teams through the Embrace Your Freakness experience. And then so one of those people said, that was really great. We really need to work on our culture. You're really good with helping people develop culture. Well, I didn't even know what culture was at that point, right? This is like 2010, 2011. Culture, nobody was using that word. And I said, well, I don't know what culture is, but I can help you build a better environment. And so it just kind of started growing from there. And then I started using the word culture because that guy introduced the word to me. And then Jessie Jacob came to work with me, and she said she was working also part-time at the Sprint Accelerator. And so she said, hey, why don't you come do some of your speed reading people or your Embrace Your Freakness for the accelerator, because they don't talk to these companies at all about culture, building culture for the business. They only tell them how to accelerate business growth. And so I went and did a couple of sessions, and Jessie and I figured, you know what, there really needs to be a culture accelerator, because these people need to learn how to do that, and they need to learn how to build that culture, at least the foundation for it, quickly. And so then we created the concept of the Culture Lab. And so we started offering that inside of accelerators. So we did the Sprint Accelerator, and BKC Bank had a FinTech Accelerator. We did a few of those. And so that's kind of where that was born. Well, then we started offering it on its own. It was a 3-month program. So it was 90 days. And so you would sign up and you would come once a month. So there were 4 sessions. And you would have time in between. And then every week, so you would get your 3 hours worth of content on a Friday morning. And then each week, Jessie would call, and I created this concept called a concierge call. And I said, it's not a coaching call. Jessie's going to call and check in. It's 15 minutes just to help you make sure that you're doing what you said you wanted to do based on what you learned in the class. And so the feedback we got, Jeff, was that was maybe the most helpful thing, because people got the idea, but then you were holding them accountable for what they committed to do. And so we did that for about 5 years. And then Jessie got a job. She's now doing full-time culture work for Culture Amp. And so she moved on to bigger and better things. And I just, on my own, didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to move on to other things. But it was a lot of fun. We got to meet a lot of people, got to see some really cool cultural changes. And then about the time we started to disband, one of the reasons too was culture then became like this hot topic, right? Everybody's doing it. Everybody's talking about it. And so that's when I said, I think I'm ready to move on to something else.
The interesting part of that, I think, because I love, I'm a builder and I love startups. I was employee 55 at Sprint PCS. I was early on at Sprint. They were only about 18 months old. Worked at Aratana Therapeutics as employee 36, employee 55 at Sprint PCS. But it's the best time to build the culture.
Yeah,
because it's a blank whiteboard, and I'm just amazed at the people that don't take advantage of that. Like bring people in. one of my best experiences was Sprint PCS because one, we had a lot of money. We were a $10 billion funded startup in 1995. So do that math on today's dollars. And it's like, you can hire people, this is what we're going to be like. I mean, it's phenomenal. And some people, I work with one head of HR and they didn't embrace the startup culture. It was just like, the same stuff. And, I go, I was like, what employee number am I? And the person went, what do you mean? I go, we're a startup. It's a thing. Startups, you want to know what employee number you are.
Yeah.
But they didn't even know the concept. So it's just amazing to me that they didn't. You might want to explain just for maybe some younger viewers who Patch Adams is.
So Patch Adams was a doctor, and he has dedicated his life. He's still alive. He's still working, but he's dedicated his life to raising money and only working with kids. He's not a pediatrician by trade, but he does work with children and terminally sick kids typically. And he's got the Gesundheit Foundation, which is located in West Virginia, I believe. My understanding is he actually lives in Urbana, Illinois, right where I started. So small world.
Yeah.
But he would dress up for the kids, right? He'd dress up as a clown on all these different things. And so in the late 90s, early 2000s, Robin Williams started a movie called Patch Adams. And so they brought him to the silver screen. And so Robin Williams played this doctor, and you can only imagine what Robin Williams would be like playing a doctor. I never saw the movie because once I met Patch, I didn't want to ruin that by seeing the movie. But it was a great keynote because he was very entertaining, and he wore his clown outfit in the airport.
I talk to leaders, obviously not only the podcast, but I'm always interested because I think one of the challenges of a leader today is that there's never been so many different generations in the workplace. So you got the baby boomers up to the Gen Zs. I think that's the current, 5-ish generations. So no one's had to lead that many different generations. I would love your thoughts on that and how it's changed your approach, if it has.
I think as I study the human brain, we have these safety mechanisms, Jeff. And so I think it's like 95% of everything that you're ever exposed to, your brain blocks out, right? And because otherwise your brain would literally explode because there's so much stimuli coming in all the time. And so we block a lot of stuff out. And so I think like personality tests are kind of along the same lines. We like to create shortcuts for ourselves, right? So I think the same thing happens with the generations. So does it help to understand people with the generations? Yes, but then we apply our shortcuts to it, just like the personality tests, right? So it's like, oh, you're a boomer. Okay, well then now I'm going to put you in a box, right?
Right.
You take Myers-Briggs. Oh, you're an introvert. Okay, well now you're going, oh, you're an extrovert. Now you go in that box, right? And now I say it's okay to be an introvert. It's okay to be an extrovert. Just don't be a pervert. Now you know why I'm not doing comedy. But people,
life advice from Frank Keck.
Yeah,
there you go.
But we have these great instruments, but then we use them to just like label people and put them in a box because it's extra work to actually understand them beyond that. So I think the generations helps us to understand generalities, and I think that can be very helpful. But I also think it can harm just as much. And I see people using, as somebody who's a boomer, that's now not a positive word, right? But when and the boomers that was the first generation where this whole generation thing started. And so for a long time it was like a big plus to be a baby boomer. But it was baby boomer, right? Well, the kids don't call us baby boomers, they just call us boomers. And it's not necessarily a positive thing. So I think there can be really positive things from it, but I think we kind of take it and we use it against people. Oh, well, you're Gen X. Well, you're the lost generation, right? Or, oh, you're the millennial. Oh, well, then you must fit this. And so my problem with it is we then ignore the person. Like we don't see the person, we see the label. And so the very thing that I think it was designed to help people not do, it does, right?
Right.
So the generations was to help people to understand people better. It can do that, but I think a lot of times it doesn't do that because we don't use it right. But so I don't
Right.
know if that was really the answer you were looking for. I find it very
No,
helpful. I do think based on what's going on in the childhood of each of the generations, what's important to them is different. So I think some of those
yeah.
generalities are fascinating. And every generation has something unique about them that the others don't.
I do think it helps understand in a broad perspective people born in different years. But to me, leadership, one of the things is caring about you as a person, right? So just understanding that person is what you need to do, and see what motivates them or doesn't motivate them. And if you care about somebody as a person, not what they're going to do for you at XYZ company. Marty Schottenheimer, the great Kansas City chief coach for many years, when he died, almost to the player, the quotes were, Marty cared about me not only as a football player, but he cared more about me as a person. And I think that's great leadership, right? Because, at the end of the day, I want you to be happy. And maybe you get that working for me. But if you don't, let's figure out where you're going to be happy and get you there, right? Because I don't
100%.
take, yeah. So
100% agree.
yeah.
And this kind of ties into what I'm working on now is I have this program called Speed Reading People, and I'm writing a new book about it, about people decoding. I'm calling it the people decoding system. And the difference between this and like a Myers-Briggs, and I love those instruments. I love to take the tests and find out about myself and all that kind of thing. But what I noticed with what we're doing is speed reading people is dynamic interaction. So it's okay, here's some things to pay attention to help you understand Jeff in the moment, because Jeff changes from moment to moment, right? Jeff's motivation is going to change from moment to moment. So what are those cues that you can watch that Jeff's going to give off to help you understand what's important to him in this moment? And so we call that dynamic interaction versus if you take Myers-Briggs, that's static information, right? So that's a snapshot in time
Right. Yeah.
of what you were when you took that particular assessment, which is
Right.
better than not having anything at all. And to your point, it's really how do we understand other people more? And that's a skill. And I don't think that's a skill that's taught in schools. But I think that's, I work really hard with my kids to teach them you need to be able to understand yourself and understand other people. And you talk about leaders who understand their people and can help their people get the most out of themselves and their lives. Those are the leaders who are going to be successful. One of my heroes is Zig Ziglar, and I remember meeting him in 1998 in San Antonio at a convention. And Zig, one of my favorite quotes of his was, he said, "You can get anything you want in life by helping other people get what they want."
Yep.
And I
Love
think
that quote.
it's so true.
We're a lot alike in terms of, you need to have fun at work, but why do you think people are against fun at work?
I think somewhere along the lines, people think, well, if you're goofing off, you're not being productive, right? And so there's a lot of people. I put them under the driver classification. You get into driver mode where you just want to get results. You don't want to have fun. You got to get stuff done. So there's a time and place for everything. But I think, I've met a lot of people who get in that driver mode and they start having success in getting results, and then they just want to stay there and live there. And
Right.
you got to have flexibility. You can't be in that mode all the time, right? Just like you can't
Right.
be in party mode all the time. So it's there's you've got to be able to vary things. But I think it all started with people who needed to get stuff done, needed to hit deadlines, and then that felt good to them, and they're like, well, I don't need to have fun at work. And I think fun has kind of become for some people a bad word.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also too, I mean, you know, the early baby boomers, especially, I mean, it was an industrial revolution of, and it was mainly manufacturing jobs that started it in the 50s and the 60s. And it was the manufacturing mentality. You work 8 to 5, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
just got to be there. You got to be there, got to be there. And it's not, we make money today in most corporations, that, are not hospitals or, but you got to think, and you get your best ideas when you're relaxed.
Yep.
You get your best ideas when you're taking a shower because you're relaxed, right? Or if we're on a run, like corporations should put showers in their buildings and let people shower for 15 minutes, and they might get some good ideas.
How did you
I
make
just
your
thought
money?
of that right now.
How'd you make your money, Jeff? Well, I had the idea of putting
Yeah.
desks in people's showers at work.
It was like Night Shift with Michael Keaton. You put the mayonnaise in the tuna, and then you already have the prepackaged
Call
tuna fish.
Starkist.
I'd like to hear more about your speed reading people. Like, what's kind of the concept there? And I know your next book is going to be focused on that.
So when I was many years ago, I was teaching for national seminars the self profile, and I thought, man, this is a really neat tool. And I was working with a retailing customer, and I said, why don't you just have your customers fill this out before your salespeople sell them a TV or whatever? And they said, well, that's a great idea, but it's also a stupid idea. I said, well, why is that? And they said, because you have to fill it out. And if you're going to go buy a TV or something in a retail store, why would you stop and fill out an assessment and then have it graded? That's going to take 45 minutes right there. And so I wanted to come up with a way to be able to understand what's going on in that person's mind right now. And I'd always been curious about this. And then a friend of mine introduced me to NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And so I started studying NLP, and I thought, here's the answer. Right. And so I I started putting some of these pieces together, and then a couple other things that I figured out on my own. But like, we start with chunk size, right? And chunking is like big chunk or small chunk. Are you looking at the big picture or the detail oriented? And you have a natural preference of which one you go to. So if you're big chunk, you have a natural preference of looking at the big picture. If you're small chunk, you have a natural preference of digging down into the details. Well, if you and I go to have a conversation and you're in big chunk and I'm in small chunk, we're not going to communicate, right? It's not going to be effective. We're not going to understand each other. And so that's a simple concept. People can get it pretty quick. And then there's cues about, people give you cues of if they're big chunk or small chunk. And so we teach people, if you will pay attention to these cues, you'll be able to understand, and think about how much better your communication will be simply by understanding, I need to meet that person where they are. And so that's
Right.
that's the concept of the book, is meet them where they are, because they're not going to meet you where you are. And so it's merely
Right.
teaching people, how do you know where somebody is so you can meet them there? And so it's from that idea of the retail store, but it's also all my years on stage, like having to read an audience. You have about
Right.
7 seconds to read an audience and to get in flow with them really quickly. And it's just some of those things that I've learned doing this job for so long, that I'm now passing along to other people. And as I teach the class, people are like, there's no way that works, until they do it with a partner and
Right.
and they experience it themselves, and they're like, man, that's like magic.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. We talked about, graduating college, getting that first job. I love asking, great leaders like yourself, what advice do you have for that recent college graduate that's going to start their professional career and get that first job?
I think the biggest advice I would have is focus on amplify what makes you remarkable. So don't listen to what everybody else tells you, but the things that you enjoy doing the most, the things that you're the best at doing, how do you amplify those things? Right. And so, like, there's all kinds of stories about people who just followed their dreams. Like Steve Jobs, I don't think finished college, right?
Right. Yeah, he did not.
But he had this passion for design, actually, right? And so he was able to take that passion for design, and that's a big piece of what made Apple Apple. Was it was just designed very differently. So I think if you can figure out, okay, what makes me unique? What is it that makes me remarkable? And remarkable is when you leave a room, that's what people talk about after you leave it. And it can be
Yep.
positive or negative, doesn't matter, right? If it's negative, look at the opposite of that, because there's a positive in there. But when someone leaves the room, what do they talk about, right? When Jeff leaves the room, what do people talk about? Oh,
Right.
man, he's funny. Oh, man, did you see his hair? He's got perfect Italian hair.
You're the best. Frank, thanks so much for coming on the Corporate Couch. I love talking to you. I'm always energized after our conversation, and you make me laugh. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. This was a lot of fun.
I just love Frank. I got a big question for you, though, Joe. Who do you think's funnier, me or Frank?
Oh, you're way, way funnier than Frank is.
Wow.
Mainly because you're my partner and you're my friend, and I have to say that.
That's it. Good job. Good job. No, I love his humor. We could have talked all day. He actually had a hard stop, so we probably would have talked longer.
It could have gone on, huh?
So many different things about Frank that I love. Wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and going to graduate high school. He told his dad he wanted to do that, and his dad goes, "You can't do that." Frank goes, "Why?" "Well, you're not funny." There's some parental encouragement, but yeah, there's so many things. Whenever somebody can bring up one of my favorite quotes of all time, the Zig Ziglar quote, "You can get anything you want in life by helping other people get what they want."
Isn't that great?
I love that, an episode with that in it.
I love Zig. I wish Zig was still around. We could have him on the podcast.
Oh yeah, that'd be.
Think we'd get him. He'd run the whole thing.
Southern.
Oh yeah, yeah. He'd run the whole thing.
Yeah, but yeah, he just had so many good takes, and to work for Dale Carnegie at a young age, like he was like in his mid-20s, and he did that, and then he was making some good money. I think he quit his mortgage banking job at April 1st of 2001, April Fool's Day, and his boss goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to be a motivational speaker." And his boss goes, "How do you do that?" And Frank goes, "I have no idea.
I don't know.
But I'm going to figure it out," he said. Yeah, and that's just the culture labs. He created that evolution, the generational label trap. I've talked to many leaders, and I believe it's one of the hardest times to be a leader because of all the different generations in the workplace. And Frank kind of took a contrarian view on that, talked about, how labels are traps. So you don't try to get to know the person sometimes as much as saying, "Oh, I already know the person because they're a millennial, or they're a Gen Y or a Gen Z, or whatever." So I just thought that was great, and he just has so many good. I don't know. Embrace Your Freakness. Come on, books and trainings about that. We talked about having great ideas when you're relaxed and at ease, and how laughter makes things easier and more memorable. But then I said, well, yeah, when you're relaxed, so we should put showers in people's offices, because you get some of your best ideas in the shower. He goes, "Yeah, oh, Jeff, yeah, that's a great business. Hey, Jeff, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, I put showers in people's cubes." He immediately pivoted.
Yeah,
it was so funny. But like I said, I could have talked to Frank for a long time. Joe, what you get out of the episode?
It was an amazing episode, amazing person, amazing, just off the cuff, these things that you can tell. You wrote down everything. I wrote down everything. We could just go on and on about it. One of the funniest things was one of the first jobs that he had was selling radio advertising to the Amish.
Who didn't own radios.
They don't own radios. They don't own a pickup truck. They don't own nothing.
His territory was in Amish land, and of course they weren't going to buy any ads.
And I think we've talked about this before, that I grew up around where a whole bunch of Amish people, and I can imagine that the Amish, if you actually called on them, and you wouldn't, but if you did, they know what a radio is. They're very familiar with it. They're not going to be interested in it at all. One of the things that the Amish have to do is, if they have a dairy farm, though they can't use the electricity to run the pumping machines, but as a concession, because this is what USDA made them do, and the FDA made them do, is that they will have a portable generator that's run off of diesel. They'll burn the diesel to create the electricity to run the milking machines. So, you do what you got to do, but right. Radio advertising was not going to be in their target. Yeah. I was also intrigued, because you touched on this a little bit, when he talked about that a lot of people have the idea that if people are goofing off, that they're not being productive. And he said, obviously, that's not true at all, and that's where your idea putting a shower in everybody.
Yeah, people should have fun at work.
They should have fun at work. And that was one of my biggest failings as a brand new manager when I was first promoted up into management. I would come up to people on my team having fun at work, and I was the buzzkill. I was the one that would come in and tell them to get back to work, and because I thought I was doing the right thing. And boy, I'm embarrassed by that now. I'm ashamed of that. That's not something to be proud of. And I wish it wouldn't have worked out that way, but it did. It was just a wonderful interview. I loved every minute of it. It was great.
Yeah. Your past employees are still going to therapy based on
They
your
are.
leadership.
They're still. I'm Facebook friends with some of them, and they're still in therapy, complaining about their first boss that they ever had. And
yeah, I love this quote he had. And I think it's for any person, but he specifically, when I asked for advice for recent college graduates,
yeah,
he said, amplify what makes you remarkable. And, basically your strength and what makes you different. And, that's the whole embrace your freakness, basically,
right.
Concept. So I get to talk to Frank all day long. I think he's a gift to not only the Kansas City community, but I know he speaks all over the country, and helps people. So
he was great.
Yeah. So anything new with you, Joe? You got any plans for this weekend? What's going on in your life? Yeah,
what I just did a little bit ago was I'm always trying these new things. So I went to see a psychic, just to see what it was like, So I knocked on her door, and she said, "Who's there?" And I said, "You tell me."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.